We're finally getting the Absolute Justice League, and their story begins with a bang. I've got to tell you, this comic is incredible. Alright, let's dive in. The story starts in 1951 with Hawkman from the Absolute Universe. He begins by saying, "Gentlemen of the House of Un-American Activities Committee, you called me to this closed-door session to answer certain questions, and I've thought long and hard about the answers. During my covert work as the Hawkman, my true identity has remained my own secret. Now you say that I have to give that secret up. My face, my name, my life. I do consider these my own business, but sometimes business takes a backseat to pleasure. And you know what? It would be a real pleasure to inform on the commie rats nibbling away at this great country. What do you want to know, boys?" Then the story jumps to the present day where we meet Oliver Queen, the Absolute Green Arrow. Which is wild because I didn't even know this version existed. So Oliver gets a call from Roy Harper. It's a one-way conversation, with Roy talking about how things are going well for him. Oliver says he's training in the Arrow Cave, hitting his targets and staying sharp. He's not as perfect as the main DC version, but he's still pretty good. As the call goes on, we start to learn more, especially about a man named Jubal Slade. In the old Green Lantern, Green Arrow comics, specifically Green Lantern Volume 2, number 76, Jubal was just a greedy landlord, a total slumlord. But in the Absolute Universe, things are very different, and Oliver explains how he says, "No, I told you about his island. All those private flights, and it's just kids because he bought the cops, Roy. He's bought the courts. This system was built for guys like this. He's basically a Jeffrey Epstein stand-in in the Absolute Universe, which is kind of crazy." And that's where Oliver is like, I have to do something. Somebody has to do something. We can't let this whole thing go without anyone doing anything. And seemingly Roy Harper asked the question, why you? Because the response of Green Arrow is, why not me? All this stuff that I have, this money, like what does it do? What do I do? What are we actually doing here? Any of us? Because something is killing us all. Some moral cancer. It's rotting us from the inside out, it's rotting our souls. And where Roy kind of seems to tell him to calm down, his response is like, do not tell me to calm down. I mean it. You can be in or out, but I am serious. This way I can make a difference in the world. And he says, this is the direction I was always headed in. After that, the story moves away from Oliver Queen and focuses on Hector Hammond. Now Hector is basically the main villain from the Green Lantern comics. In the main DC universe, he's one of Hal Jordan's oldest enemies. You probably remember him with the huge head and small body from all those experiments. But in the Absolute Universe, things are different. He's not mutated. Instead, he's a powerful corporate tycoon. Along with other villains from this world, he's trying to weaponize superhero powers to gain even more control. When you look at the big picture, the Absolute Universe is basically in a superpower arms race, with everyone trying to outmatch the other. And the funny thing is, Hector doesn't even take Oliver Queen seriously. He's casually talking with Jubal, acting like this is all just business as usual. A guy turns 40, gets a gray hair, gets ideas. I bought a Maserati. Queen grew a conscience. It happens, but take a breath here. What can we actually do? What's his next move? And he says, he talks big, sure, but it's Oliver Queen. He doesn't want results. He just wants to feel righteous. And nothing feels more righteous than losing. So get him around a table. This goes away in a month. Like maybe $5 million bucks, chump change. Who knows? But just trust me here. I know this guy. Oliver Queen is never going to surprise anybody. And so that's when you find out that Hector is showing up here at a meeting. And that's the crazy thing is the guy who's there at the door tells him like, you can't have any electronic devices on you. No phones or anything like that. So in the end, Hector finally hands over what he was asked for. But not without complaining and threatening the guy's job first. When he enters the room, he finds all the major villains of the Absolute Universe gathered there. Absolute Ra's al Ghul, Absolute Dr. Thawne from the Flash comics, the Joker, and Veronica Cale, who seems to be this universe's version of Amanda Waller. It's like a massive villain team-up, and what's funny is that they're all meeting each other for the first time, even though they've all heard of one another. As soon as Hector walks in, Veronica Cale looks at him and says, hey, you know, happy you could join us. I'm Veronica Cale, National Security Advisor. I'm the boss. Did you have something to say? and Hector Hammond just starts cracking jokes. He's like, "If we're doing coffee orders, I'll take a macchiato." And right off the bat, Ra's al Ghul is like, "No, this room is not for games. It is not for play. Speak of work or do not speak." And that's where Hector's like, "Who in the hell do you think you are?" And Ra's just says like, "I'm Ra's al Ghul. If you do not know what that means, be glad and be silent." One of the coldest lines that I've heard his character say in the Absolute Universe. It's amazing. But it's where Hector is just kind of like, "Look, I was being rhetorical. I know who you are." And at that point, Dr. Thawne's like, "I have to side with Mr. Al Ghul on this one. Our time is more valuable than any resource on Earth, Hammond. Far too precious to waste on your little jokes." And that's where Absolute Joker is like, "Agreed, I do not enjoy jokes." Now, Absolute Joker is going to have an amazing moment later on. It's one of the coolest aspects of his character that you get to see here. But you kind of get this just discussion point, right? The question being, why are we all here? What's the point of organizing this big powwow? And that's where Veronica Cale says, "Let's get started." She says, New York, 1939. Chemist Wesley Dodds gets rich off his patents for improved anesthetic compounds. Soon after, a masked detective called the Sandman makes waves in the society pages. Armed with a non-lethal sleep gas, Wesley Dodds is young, idealistic, romantic. It's not hard to put two and two together. Even before Dodds is found shot dead in his Sandman suit, his basement laboratory has been ransacked. A year later, the US military acquires some new and very lethal nerve gas weapons. Was that lethal gas brewed from Dodds' stolen notes? Ask the conspiracy theorists, did it win us the war? Ask the historians. They will say yes. 1942, Gotham City. Ted Grant, a professional boxer, is framed for murder by small-time hoods. Grant's young. He's romantic. He puts on a cat costume, beats the hell out of them, and then clears his name. He calls himself the Wildcat. The neighborhood eats it up, so he busts some more small-time hoods, then medium-time hoods. Working his way up on a stakeout, he overhears a factory inspector taking a bribe from a munitions magnate to look the other way on safety standards. And then he comes into $50,000 tax-free, and that's the end of Wildcat. Grant buys a gym in Schenectady, trains a couple of champions, and dies peacefully in his sleep aged 81. And here's the crazy thing. Veronica says 16 people die in workplace accidents in that factory over the next 5 years, making that gas, as I mentioned, the one that won us the war. So maybe taking the money was the most heroic thing that Wildcat ever did. And then she says, 1951, Los Angeles, Iron Monroe, a movie stuntman and a real freak of nature. Rumor had it he could stop a bullet at 50 yards and outrun a locomotive. He decides he wants to fight a never-ending battle for truth and justice. The never-ending battle seems to involve a lot of social meetings. He's called before the House Un-American Activities Committee, and it's done in a special closed-door session around the same time as a couple of other adventurers of the period. But Monroe refuses to name names. He calls McCarthy a demagogue. And that's the end of him. Within a year, he's living in a lonely shack in the Nevada desert, which is accidentally targeted for a chemical weapons test because someone filed the wrong paperwork. Apparently, Monroe's lungs were not as tough as the rest of him, but they were just as red. And she says 3 out of 100 examples throughout history. There have been individuals who acted outside the status quo, and the status quo has dealt with those individuals one way or another. Who remembers them now? And so it goes, and so it has always gone until now. And she says the Gateway event so-called because it took place in Gateway City, and because it apparently opened the door to a whole new bag of craziness. That thing is called a tetracide. It was the second most dangerous creature to appear that day. This is the most dangerous, absolute Wonder Woman. Well, Veronica says, she arrived here from hell, she deafened a city, she became a Gorgon, turned the tetracide to stone, then destroyed it with one punch. She also, and this is the part that I find the most concerning, took operational command of the scene. Troops on the ground deferred to her based on what exactly? Her bearing, her tone, mind control. Why was she not arrested? At the same time, word spreads of another creature. This one is male, violently disrupting Lazarus Corp operations in Brazil, shrugging off artillery that would have blown a hole right through Iron Monroe, melting tanks with his eyes, following which a trained peacemaker agent ignores the Brainiac algorithm's recommendations and writes her after-action report directly in somewhat poetic detail. And so she says it's indicative of a trend. Gotham City. This one is human. At least we think. But he seems to redefine what human can be. He appears and vanishes like a ghost. He somehow built his resources into the city itself. He wears an axe blade on his chest, for God's sake. Joker comments and says he didn't take the money. And that's where Veronica says, yes, exactly right. Unlike Ted Grant, he did not take the money. But what else? A vast alien object falls in the town of Evergreen. A second Gateway event, less telegenic this time. Thank God. It helps that the object isn't around anymore. We know who the survivors of the event are, and they've been altered. Meanwhile, a military experiment at the Fort Fox base goes haywire. And again, there was at least one survivor who remains altered and on the run. And what other beings are out there? What forms do they take? Are they even corporeal? We don't know. And we cannot know, which is a very important statement because it shows no one knows about Martian Manhunter. Like Veronica, Cale doesn't know. Nobody else is aware. Veronica continues on. She says, but we do know that things are escalating. These new threats are far more dangerous than any before them. And the greatest danger they pose is not what they can do, but what they can convince others to do, what they can inspire. Peacemaker agents ignoring protocol. Military officers taking orders from civilians. Seasoned cops refusing to open fire on a man dressed as a bat. There is order in the world. There is a hierarchy. These things make a mockery of all of that. They could topple everything if allowed to. If we allow them to. Previously, we could all meet these threats individually. I no longer believe that's possible. You all have private resources, as do I. As National Security Advisor and Director of Area 41, I have additional government resources. But if we do not pull those together, if we do not work together, these monsters will take our world apart. And in the face of this entire speech, Hector Hammond is just like, no sale. He's like, I get it. Uncle Sam's hard up these days, so the begging bowl comes with a scare story, but nobody's scared toots. Because the point of that little speech was that people like us always handle people like them, and frankly, I don't need any help now. And that's where Ra's al Ghul just kind of chimes in. It's like, I think you do. And where Hector kind of goes on and talking about how he's dealing with the Green Lantern and all that kind of stuff. That's not what Ra's al Ghul is talking about. Ra's al Ghul is like, I think now is a good time, Cale. She says, please send Mr. Hall in. And when Hawkman comes walking in, he's got the corpse of Oliver Queen having bashed his head in with a mallet. And he's just like, questions? Does anybody have any questions? And that's where Ra's al Ghul says, that is how we solve problems, Mr. Hammond. Not in a month, in a day, no sitting around the table, no chump change, no games, and no jokes. And so at that point, Dr. Thawne chimes in, right? And she's like, so, I mean, was this like a murderer or some kind of covert assassination? Is it some kind of a threat? Blackmail? Like, what's the point, Cale? And Cale just simply says, call it a demonstration, right? What power can do for money and what money can do for power. How difficult is it for you to get intel on your little escaped experiment from Fort Fox? Eleanor, how much effort did it take for Hammond to be the first on the scene in Evergreen? How many millions, how many favors? But next time, and there will be a next time, you could each just make one phone call. At which point Dr. Thawne just kind of says, unless Lazarus calls first, and then I suppose it's a bidding war. But frankly, I still agree with Hammond. She continues, as convenient as an alliance might be for you, I don't see the need to be in each other's pockets. It's not as if we're friends. And that's where Absolute Joker stands up and says, no, not friends. May I have the floor? And then he just says, thank you. And notice this, no one interrupts him. No one gets in the way of what Absolute Joker has to say. And so he says, I'm going to share some recent research from a particle physics laboratory under my aegis. Needless to say, this is proprietary information. If any of what I'm about to tell you reaches any ears outside this room, I will take it seriously. And even Brainiac, who's watching through the glasses of Ra's al Ghul, just simply says duly noted. And so Joker continues on and he says the Higgs boson is known in popular science as the God particle. It's considered by many to be the final piece of the puzzle of quantum mechanics, the one elementary particle that confirms how the universe works. And he says they're wrong. Last year we found a better one, the true end of the search. We call it the Omega particle. Studying it has revealed fundamental truths about the world we live in. The particle forms the basic building block of all creation. And now we know how it behaves, how it reacts, and what it reacts to. This particle, this energy, it has a spiritual dimension to it, a moral dimension. And that's where Thawne is like, you're telling us a subatomic particle understands good and evil. You cannot possibly be serious. And Ra's al Ghul immediately cuts her off and is like, no, he doesn't joke. He never jokes. Listen to what he's telling you. And so like Joker continues on and he says, the fundamental forces of the universe trend in one direction. And we know that includes societal forces. Gravity distorts the universe. And so the river runs, the curtain falls, the yoke is heavy. We accept that man is tethered to the earth. We do not believe a man can fly. With this discovery, we must now accept that there is likewise a moral gravity pulling down, keeping everything that is in its place. Existence is ordered and ordained. Water flows downhill. Those who have, those who have not, have not. The rich get richer, the poor get poor. Some hold the winning cards and some clutch a handful of jokers. This is not chance. This is not accident, this is design. The sore losers in the game of life see their fate woven into the fabric of creation and rail against it. They call it doom. There's a philosophical term for that perspective, the just world fallacy. And imagine being so twisted, so filled with hate, so paralyzed by fear. Imagine thinking that it's a fallacy, but the world is just. We have evidence not of doom but of natural order, worked upon the world by a higher power. If spoiled little anarchists like the late Mr. Queen here would stand against that order, I call that injustice. And injustice must be fought. Chaos must be fought, we must fight it. And how can we fail? God is on our side. So are we friends? We are not. To claim friendship with any of you would insult you. To succumb to friendship is against the moral order. But we can be allies here in this room. Our watchtower, looking down from high above the herd. We can be in league between us. We can ensure the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice. They call it doom. A toast then to an ordered world and to our Justice League. It's honestly one of the best speeches I've ever heard in my life. Al Ewing. Everything he works on turns out amazing. But here's the wild part. The story isn't over yet, not even close. After that, we switch over to Brainiac, who's been watching everything happen through Ra's al Ghul's glasses, and he simply says, fascinating data. Just fascinating. And without your methods, I'm not sure I could have acquired it, so thank you for that, Mirror Master. Mirror Master says, I didn't come here for thanks, Brainiac. I need your analysis. I need to know how it all connects here and in my mirror, how it connects and how it reflects. But at the end of the day, Brainiac just says, indeed, a measure of balance suits my own goals. Hammond balances Ra's and the Hawkman. Their egos can focus on one another. And Thawne's skepticism matches Veronica Cale, the true believer. But the man who doesn't joke, we need to reflect him, learn his secrets, and negate his threat. There is a name I recall from my glimpse into your mirror world, someone worth investing in. And I think for the Justice League to be complete, it needs one more member. And so at that point, you switch over to this final guy, and he's just sitting there drinking tea, sunset and green tea. It's a wonderful life, isn't it? And this woman says, well, you know, I certainly think so. And he says, it's strange. I was an angry young man, Dora, envious of others, for their power, their popularity, even their looks. But right here in this moment, I cannot think of a single thing that I want. And that's where she's like, I mean, can't you? Because the children are in bed, you know. But like at that moment, his phone starts ringing and he's like, hold that thought. And where she kind of cracks a joke about how, you know, it's always the phone and it's always the worst time. And he's like, you know, no rest for the wicked, as they say, I'll just be a moment, darling. And so he answers the phone and he says, this is Lex Luthor speaking. How can I be of help? We're finally getting absolute Lex Luthor, and I can't even hide how excited I am. This story is just incredible, seriously. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. I'll see you all next time.